Swanzey Campground in Swanzey, New Hampshire. And we're having good weather, and we're having a ball. Yeah, it's so good to be here. It just is reminiscing of all the times that I was here when I was young, and I really, really am enjoying it. It just warms my little heart.
Because it's 48 degrees this morning and it's freaking cold.
I'm done. My sister Carolyn and I would get up early in the morning, and we'd get dressed, and we'd take the flat bottom boat, and we had life jackets on, because my dad always said, do not go out in a boat without a life jacket. So we were very diligent. We didn't want to get into trouble. And so we'd get our fish poles, and we would catch perch. And they wouldn't be very big. They might have been 6, 8 inches. And then we'd pick the blueberries that were high bush blueberries on the other side of the lake, not too far from our cottage. And we would have fish and blueberry cake for breakfast. My mom would clean the fish and fry them, and she would fry them in flour and cornmeal, and then we would have, she'd make blueberry cake, and so that was our breakfast. And we were really satisfied with that. That was a pretty healthy breakfast. And so then we'd come home, and we probably would maybe, help my mom or do dishes, or we would get into the boat and we'd go down to the mill pond and pick all the water lilies that we could, and then we'd come home and we would put them in a little glass dish that my mom had, and it made the dining room smell really, really good. We used to play cards, or we had horses down there. My dad rented horses that were from the Putney farm up in Chesterfield, and they were there for 2 weeks. And sometimes I'd have a little smaller horse because I was 2 years younger, and I couldn't get up on a big one. I had to be on the step in order to get on that big horse, and I was kind of frightened. Carolyn wasn't. She was a horsewoman, and she wasn't frightened. But when we started galloping, that was a trip. That was for me, because Carolyn's horse would gallop along, and of course the other horse was going to do the same thing, And so I was kind of young, and I was afraid I was going to fall off, but I never did. But I did get stepped on. He stepped on my little toe, and that hurt. And then, because we wore shorts, I got saddle sores on my inside of my knees, on both of them, and they were infected because of riding the horse without long pants on. So, but it was hot, and so we always wore shorts, during the day. And so we would ride around the lake and on horseback, or sometimes we'd take the dogs. We had bloodhounds, and we had a couple in a crate, King and Queenie, and we had a Woody, and I wish I had that today. We did. We had what they call a Woody, and it was a car that was like a station wagon, but it was all wood. The whole thing was wood, and today it would sell for $50,000, because I knew of a person that I took care of that he had one, and that's what he sold it for, a refurbished and so forth. But I always liked that car because they had dog crates in the back, one for King and one for Queenie, so that when we went to the kennel club out in Wheelock Park, I would go with my father and sometimes Carolyn, and he would show the dogs, and they got ribbons. We had we had a whole wall full of ribbons that they got because he took good care of the bloodhounds, you know, and they were the dogs that would go and find people. And he got a call that a little boy had been lost, and so he was taking the dogs down to Troy, I think it was near that area, and it was the little Dunton boy. He was 2 years old, and he had walked off from the house. And so my father had another man with him, probably, to manage the 2 or 3 dogs. But they found him in the woods. He was a mile from his home, and he had taken his sunsuit off, and he was sitting on it. And that made the centerfold of Life magazine in 1948, or 47 maybe. I think it was 47. And I was so proud, you know, that my dad did something like that, because no other people had dogs to train, and he would train them and ship them around the world. I would sit on my rock, and no one else used to come up and sit except me. It wasn't a huge rock, but one I could climb up on, and I would just sit there and listen to the voices of this boys' camp as they came down the lake in the canoe. It was from Camp Jewel at that time, and it was a Jewish camp. And I loved to hear them sing or talk or say chants, you know, like, this left, right, you know, or something, you know. And I left my mother in Tennessee, and I left my mother in Tennessee. Stuff like that. And that was kind of amusing. And I would sit there because I couldn't go swimming because my mom was taking a nap. She was napping. I don't know where Carolyn was at that time. But I had to wait till she woke up, and then I could go in swimming. And what I'd do is I'd sit on that rock and eat peanut butter and Ritz crackers. And I made 4 doubles, and that wasn't enough. Oh, no. So I got down off my rock, and I went back into the house, and I made 4 more doubles. And came out and sat and ate my that was like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And so, and I didn't have anything to drink, I guess. I don't remember taking anything. I might have, but I didn't have anything to drink. But maybe I did in the house. But that was my peace of mind, and as a young child, the contentment that I felt when I sat on that rock and listened to kids swimming and laughing at Richardson Park. And I always wanted to go there, but my folks said, no, you have a cottage, and so you don't need to do that. See, they don't have a cottage, so that's why they're there. So you can't go over there. But as we got older, I brought my children there, and they always enjoyed that. You know, Jody was a year old. She could sit in the water, and I don't know if she wasn't walking, I don't believe. And Grandpa Forcier held her, and she was young, yeah, because I don't think she was walking yet. And we have pictures of that. We have pictures of Grandpa holding Jody when she was a year old. But we had ducks, and the ducks would come around. We had 3 or 4 white ducks, so we'd have some eggs sometimes. And then we had lady slippers, and at that time we could pick them. That was back in the late 40s, and we could pick them, but nowadays, you know, it's against the law. Yeah. And we had the dogs. We'd walk the dogs around the lake. We did a movie at the end of the lake. My dad wanted to show people how he trains dogs to find people. So what my dad did was he would have the dog sniff my pajamas, something I had worn, and then follow my scent. And so he made a 16 millimeter movie at the end of the lake, and I was up behind the rock, which was to the right, and then he hadn't started yet, so I would peek around the corner to see if he was coming. And I always knew that they would find me, and so that he would have, queen and king and on a leash, and I could hear them coming. Roo, 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 roo. And they were so excited when they were on a trail of somebody, and they were excited when they found me, and I had a little bag of meat, and I'd give them that, and I was very young, and I was not afraid, because I knew my dad would find me. I felt very confident that I could hear the cars going by, so it wasn't that I was way, way out in the woods, but I always felt that he knew what he was doing, and he was smart,
Up here on the other side of the road, there was a development called Swanzey Lake Heights. And my father and mother owned the first 6 lots on the right side of the road, and my grandparents owned the next 6 lots. And they built the cabin that's on the top of the hill. And then my father sold and bought the place on the other side, because it was already built.
So you were saying that this was very shallow and this really was a mill pond?
This was a mill pond.
Because my mom remembers coming over and picking water lilies.
That's what she was telling me.
Yeah.
There's some right there.
Yeah. So, and then this section here, this was actually the dam?
This was the original dam. The original dam and the original mill that they used to saw logs was right here. And then years later, the second dam was built and the mill was moved down there.
Uh-huh.
And you could ask me the names, but
No.
it eludes me right now.
Yeah, no worries. So this was, what did you call the cove?
The channel.
The channel.
Yep, this is the channel.
Yep.
And if you think about the dam here and how much higher the water was, this was all underwater.
Do you remember that, Mom?
I don't.
I would doubt she would, because you'd have to go back to like the 1790 map. And you can see on that map that the lake is a different shape.
I know that this person that built that took down 3 houses.
Right.
And the house that we had was right in front.
Yep.
And there was nobody had built on those other 2 pieces of property.
Yeah, that was Payne's on that camp there that got torn down.
That's right. I
Yep.
remember. Yes, I remember that.
But I think still to this day, these 2 lawns right here,
Yes.
you can't even mow them in the spring, let alone walk across them, because it's so wet. Because back in the day, that first dam,
Yeah.
that was where the lake was.
Wow. And that used to be Felix the Furrier's cottage.
I remember it being Judge Davis.
Oh, you do?
Yep.
Okay.
When I was a kid, it was Judge Davis on there.
Okay, so
And this
maybe
was Dr. Fleury.
maybe he.
Well, you've got 2
bought
different
that
generations here.
Right.
After.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't remember this.
See, these trees weren't, like this. This was all cleared.
Right.
My dad. There weren't any trees. There weren't any of the what do we call these tall things. And this is my rock right here, coming up. I used to sit on that rock most of the day, and there's a little place on the other side that had a flat place. I don't know whether it's still there, probably. And that's where I sat, right on that little flat place, right there. And I would watch the Camp Jewel come down with their canoes twice a day, and they would chant and they would sing. And I really enjoyed, just sitting there watching them.
because sometimes I couldn't go in swimming because I had to wait 1 hour
Oh, yes.
after lunch.
Oh, yeah,
and I
'cause you might
probably
get-
just had a sandwich.
Right, you might get
And,
cramps and drown.
And I
Mhm.
never got cramps. I never drowned.
No, me neither.
And the next cottage was Earl Quimby's.
Yep.
Yep.
I just actually was just looking in my notes that I handed you. There was in the 1939 town report. It shows Earl Quimby as one of the property owners
Yeah.
on the lake.
And Elaine Quimby was friends of my sisters. They were about the same age. And one day I had to go to a birthday party at Babsy Brown's down here.
Yep.
She was in my class in Tilden School.
Yep.
And so I asked my dad if it was all right if Earl brought me down in his boat because, or my mom, maybe it was my mom, and he brought me down to Babsy Brown's party, and then somebody picked me up.
I can remember there was always lots of parties at the Browns.
Yep.
Even when I was a kid.
We had a big rock, and I'm not sure just
Right over by that marker.
by that marker.
I was going to ask you about that rock.
Because we used to swim,
Right.
and we were little kids.
Right.
And my mom thought it was okay because we were pretty good swimmers. This is where I learned to swim.
Yeah.
And so we would swim around there, and right in back is the cottage that the Stones owned.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a couple
Yep.
of girls.
Gray Stone owned that cottage.
Yep. And I saw them on the road. They were cleaning out the backyard, and
Yep.
I asked them, not knowing she was a Stone and married somebody else.
Yep.
Yes, she
Yep.
married, and they were cleaning it up because the house was in what do you call it?
A trust?
A
Trust,
trust, yeah,
yeah.
a trust.
Dealing with that right now.
And so one of the sisters was going to buy it.
Yep. So here is Richardson Park, and I actually just asked Lee the other day why we call it Richardson Park. And he showed me where it was deeded to the town to be used as a park or swimming area free to town residents in perpetuity. And no alcohol can be sold there. Now, I don't know about you, I remember when I was a kid, I remember the Fireman's Ball and the whole home day dance
That's right.
was in that building.
That's right. Yep. And there's a plaque on the wall that Jody just took a picture of. And
The Nettie Stone plaque.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. That was given in 1921.
Yep.
Yes.
I was actually just talking to Lee about that as well. And Nettie Stone was married into the Ballou family, who owned a significant amount of this side of the lake.
Would that be Dr. Ballou's
No,
family?
I don't think so. I mean,
No,
it could have been
Could've
some relation.
Yeah. Okay.
And the town actually has a trust fund in her name, and that's where that plaque came from. And he's looking into if it was the money from that trust fund that built the pavilion. Do you remember the boys' camp?
Camp Jewel,
Nope, over here.
but I didn't know there was a boys' camp there.
This was originally Denman's home, or Denman's summer home, Denman Thompson's summer home.
Yes.
This white building that we can see here was his cottage
Sure. Yeah.
in front of the big pine tree on the right end of the beach. There was a boathouse, and there was actually a dock that came out and came across and went back in on the other side. And there was a flagpole in the water, and I'll bet you that beer keg is tied to it. 'Cause
There
it's
is a
still
place where there's a flagpole spot where there's cement. It looks like it's right close to the edge of the water. We saw that.
Yes.
So that's probably where the flagpole was originally there.
That may be, and the pole that's in the water that I'm speaking of might have been something that held the dock.
Yeah.
And then this building over here, Denman had a 2-lane bowling alley,
Oh my goodness.
and then he had a hall that had a big fieldstone fireplace at one end and a stage at the other.
Oh my goodness.
I remember tennis courts, barns, gas lights, because it was all before electricity. I put that flagpole on. I dug that hole with a chainsaw.
Did you?
But, and then I'm not sure how it ended up in the Jones family, and if the Jones family indeed ran the boys' camp, but it was called Pine Grove. Yep, and that's what it was. It was a boys' camp somewhere. I have a picture of all the boys standing out on the dock. And then in the Hurricane of '38 is what finished the camp. They sustained so much damage that they just couldn't recover from it. And the Jones stayed here until 1961, when Bill Cadmus and Ted Batt bought it and built the campground. It might have been just earlier, because they opened the campground in 1961 with 18 sites. The very first loop. That was the first 18 sites, and back when I was here, there were campers that had been here since the very first day. I think that cement bench that we see on the waterfront
Yes.
is in memory of John and Jane Roberts.
Yes, it is. That's
And
right. I saw that.
they were seasonal campers here from the day it opened till the day they passed away.
My goodness.
This piece here is 5 acres on the water. I don't believe Denman owned any on the other side. Up in the woods where we can't see, there's another house that was actually located on the other side of the road. And I just found in my notes that if there was a house that belonged to a gentleman named Marsh. And I suspect that that's the house that was moved to this side of the road. His handprint or footprint definitely goes from one end of the lake to the other. There's no question. His land stops approximately where those dead trees are in the water. And then the next place, it would have been where his son Franklin had a cottage, which ended up eventually being the Browns' cottage. The Browns being the family that owned and operated the Bullen Mill in West Swanzey, which actually gave them control of the dam. Control the height of the lake belonged to the dam, or belonged to the mill. That building actually is not the original building, but when the people that own it now, when they came in and tore down and rebuilt, they built a almost exact replica of what was there. And honestly, what was there at that point by then was just a wooden tent.
Across from the Browns' large cottage, across the road, they had a barn, and it was owned by the Pratts, because that was Babsie's grandparents, the Pratts. Yes.
Yep. I remember I remember the horse stable.
Yep, that was a horse stable. That's right.
I can remember sitting on the rock at the top of my driveway and watching the horses.
Yep.
People ride their horses by
Yep.
when I was just, this
Yep.
big. I remember that.
So did the Browns own any property
It's
now?
this is still in the Brown family.
Oh, it's still
Yes,
in the
it
Brown
is still
family.
in the Brown
Okay.
family. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yep.
And the tennis court is still there.
Yep. We saw that when
Yep.
we rode by. Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Everything is still there. I mean,
Really?
this is Brown's, and I want to say down to where that pontoon boat is. Actually, a little further than that. Because there was several members of the Brown family, so it was like a compound.
Yes. Yep. Well, Babsy had a brother and a sister. I don't know whether it was 4 children. And then the other Browns were, that was Sumner, and the other one was Gordon Brown.
Yep.
Because Gordon Brown lived right in back of us on Forest Street.
Right.
There was a stone wall, and I could climb the wall and go visit Derek.
Yep.
Because he was in my class in school.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always,
Yeah, I believe Gordon
Yeah.
owned the yellow place, which is dead ahead,
okay.
which is another building that Denman Thompson built.
Oh, is that right?
Yep.
Yes, yep.
That would be the building that Denman built for his bank robber friend, Langdon Moore.
Oh,
Because when Langdon got out of jail, he came to live with Denman, and he's another story. And there's an article in a Yankee magazine, it's a 1965 issue of Yankee magazine, about Langdon Moore. And yes, I think he could have. But yeah, Langdon robbed the Concord National Bank of $310,000,
wow.
which was a lot of money back then. Said to have been, even by today's standards, one of the biggest bank robberies in history.
And where is he buried?
In the Homestead Cemetery, I believe we call it,
In West Swansea.
in West Swansea, at the end of Denman Thompson Avenue. Put a little chain around his grave. Yeah, I remember this place was Brown's.
Yeah. Yeah.
Up on top of Christian Hill now, and I think of it. I remember for years this was Tim Brown.
Yeah. I remember Tim.
Yep, this was Tim Brown's. This was not Gordon Brown's. Gordon was up on top of the Christian Hill because I can remember a big sign that said Smiling Hill Farm, the Gordon Browns.
And what about the house up there on the hill, way up on the hill? What
The
about
house
that
way up
house?
on the hill.
When was? Do you happen to know when that was built?
I don't know when it was built, but I did find in old town records that Oscar Bourne, who was the original owner of the Pilgrim Pines property, was taxed for a house on the hill. Which would lead me to think, I never looked into it, but it would lead me to think that that's something that Oscar Bourne built.
Oh, really? No, just curious, I guess.
Yeah,
Just curious.
Just
that-
curious.
Why? Who would live way up there?
Yep, the last family name I heard was Nelson.
Oh.
There it is, the home of the bank robber. I remember when you probably must remember it too, when the road came right down along the water. You could actually drive almost on the edge of the lake down here, because the road around the lake came right down along the water.
I guess I kind of forgot that.
And
That's very possible.
This house has, there's
That's very
this house,
possible, yeah.
and then there's a barn on the other side, and the road actually went between them and split them. And had to have been in the 70s that the new road was built, so that this could be developed. The people that owned the land down here on the water, with the exception of the road, wanted to develop the land without the road there, so they were required by the town to build a new road, and then they were given the old road.
And I noticed that the dirt road further down takes you into West Swansea.
Yep,
And
Christian
we
Hill
used to-
Road.
Christian Hill Road. And my sister and I would ride to the store from the cottage around this part of the lake and go over the hill and go down to Gamalo's
Yep.
store to get bread and a few groceries,
Yeah.
and then put them in a bag and bring them on the horse, and that's how we got our groceries.
I had to use
We
my
didn't
bicycle.
have a car. My father rented 2 horses
Yep,
for us
yep.
for 2 weeks, and that's how we got our groceries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The original road actually stopped right about here, because it came up from the foot of the lake at the boat landing, and it came up and it went up over Talbot Hill into Swansea Center.
Yes, it
That
did.
was that was the original road, and then it came down and went up to Christian Hill.
Yes,
Who
'Cause I've
knows?
been
Maybe
over
that's
that.
something Denman did, because that would have been a real good shortcut.
yes, yes.
We'll have to get with Lee on that. East again. So Denman's daughters had places on the lake that Denman was a carpenter, so we got to assume that Denman built them too. This one here, this little tan one,
Yeah.
was his daughter Melvina McFarland. And then the one next door was Annie Kilpatrick. And somewhere, probably in the notes that I gave you, I have a email that I got years ago from somebody who used to come here and visit his grandmother, talking about the place and saying that she bought it from a silent film star. So, I haven't had time to check that out either. So now this house here now belongs to the Dvoraks. I've known them for years. I'm really good friends with them. And Bob came to me one day, and he said he had heard a rumor on the lake since he'd been here that Eleanor Roosevelt was staying on the lake when her husband passed away. And the yellow and red place over here at the time belonged to Lucy and LaFalle Dickinson.
Oh, I remember Dick Dickinsons, they had a place
There was the
back,
Dickinson family back by the town beach.
because they had a nice wooden boat with an inboard motor. And the boy used to come over to our house to play cards and to see our cats
Yeah.
and the dogs and
Yep.
the horses.
Yep. They used to come over to my parents' house to watch the World Series
Oh, really?
because they didn't have any TV. But the Lucy and LaFell were a different family. That family, they were mill owners down in Westport and Winchester.
Oh, really?
This family, I'm not sure what they did, but Lucy Dickinson served on a committee with Eleanor Roosevelt to form the United Nations. And this family of Dickinsons had a mansion in Keene on Roxbury Street where they just built a new apartment building. They had a mansion there, and Eleanor Roosevelt was in Keene at the time, but it was in early April, and back then in early April, I'm sorry, there was nobody out here. Just the mud alone would have done it. But the kid that sent me the email, he says he can remember coming out in the car with the chauffeur. And they were well to do. You see, we've added a barn we didn't have before. I believe the name is Small. People that own it now.
So they don't, yeah, Dickinsons don't.
No.
No.
No, it passed from Dickinson to a family named Bennett. And I believe they were somehow related to the Dickinsons. But Lucy was still around when I was a boy because we had a party line and Lucy was hard of hearing. So every time the phone rang, she would answer it because she couldn't tell one ring from the other.
My dad sold the property in '53, and so they were grown, but my sister and I were wanting to still come down here. So we would ride our bicycles to
Right.
Richardson Park
Yep.
from Keene. Yeah,
Yep.
and we were just in junior high school.
Like I was telling you earlier, somewhere I have a picture of Oscar Bourne standing on this beach, which, by the way, is a natural beach. And he's standing on that end of it, and there's absolutely nothing else here. It's 1900 something or other. And then he leased the land to Camp Jewel because they were looking for a place for a camp. And he leased it to Camp Jewel, and they started Camp Jewel here until he decided that he wanted to do Camp Bologna.
Yes.
So then they had to find another spot, and they bought the spot down there. Then Camp Bologna was here, Camp Jewel was there, up until the Hurricane of '38. Shortly after the Hurricane of '38, they rebuilt after it, but shortly after that, they moved back to Connecticut.
Because they were here, I think, most of the time until, I don't honestly remember, but I remembered as a young girl that they would come down in canoes.
Yep.
And so I'm not sure if they were here in '53 when it was sold. I don't know.
I'm actually,
I don't know.
I have that information, it's in that packet.
Okay. All right.
I can tell you exactly when they moved.
Yes.
And I would assume at that point, that's when Pilgrim Pines acquired it and started Camp Swan.
Yep.
I can remember when I was little, of course, Pilgrim Pines was nothing like it is now.
No.
And I can remember Mr. Hale, who lived down on the Rabbit Hollow Road, coming by with his tractor to come down here and mow the golf course.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. I think that was his job. He was like the maintenance man here,
Yep.
or the
Yep.
caretaker.
And I talked with a maintenance man, and I asked if people could just come and rent these cottages, and how much were they going to be? And he said, I don't know, but they are rentable.
Yeah,
I mean,
they
you
are
can
rentable.
rent them.
Mhm.
They can be rented, yes.
They are rental. My
Yes.
mother used to come down here a lot. They do elder hostels in the fall in
Yes.
the off season. My mother used to come down a lot for those, and
Oh,
she
is that
enjoyed
right?
them. Yep.
Yes.
She enjoyed them.
Yep. And Bill Zimmerman had a cottage down here.
It's funny you should mention that
Because he and my dad used to go hornpout fishing
Yep.
at 9 o'clock at night and come back, and they would have bloodsuckers on their arm. And my mom would go get the package of salt and put it on their arms to get the bloodsuckers off. My question to you is, do they have bloodsuckers here now?
I have never seen one.
You never have? Okay.
Never seen. I would drink this water.
You would drink this water.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how often would they test it to see if the fish could be eaten regularly?
It's tested a lot more now than it has been in the past.
Okay.
I don't know what the frequency is, but
Okay.
it's closely monitored by the Lake Association.
Oh, is that right? Yes. Because some places you can only eat 2 fish a month
Yeah.
or something, and I wondered if they have any restrictions on
No,
Swanzey Lake.
it's very closely monitored by the Lake
Okay,
Association.
good, good.
So, but it's funny you should mention the Zimmerman's cottage, because this morning when I was mowing the lawn, a guy came. He was walking around the lake like a lot of people do, and it turned out to be one of my friends from when I was a kid from the other side of the lake. It was Carl Scherberg. And his parents have a cottage just up from where Zimmerman's was. And
Yes.
so I said to him, I said, so what do you think of what they did to the Zimmerman's cottage? And he says, well, he says, it's a beautiful building. He says, but that was like a piece of the lake.
That's right. That's
And
right.
it was this little tiny thing.
Yes.
How or why they ever built it there, I have no idea. Because there was a little stream that ran underneath it. It was built right over the top of it.
I remember seeing it because the cottage was red.
Yep.
And I think they had 2 of them, for the parents and then for the other people. The ones that I knew were Martha and Sue,
Yep.
and they're both still living.
Oh yeah.
And they lived around the corner from us
This is the
on
spot.
Wakefield Street. They lived in Kendall Road. And so I would see them once in a while. Yeah, I would see the girls, and neither one of them ever got married. Yeah, yeah. Sue
Yep.
was a nurse, and Martha worked, but I'm not positive what she did. Yeah, Sue worked at Cheshire Medical. Yeah,
Yep.
and she was at Elliott before
Yeah.
that.
I haven't seen Sue for a long time, but I see Martha. I've seen Martha a couple of times in the store this summer.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Up ahead, we've got, like I was just mentioning, the house with the sign on the front of it that says the Boulders. We don't want to go in too close in there. It's a great place for bass fishing, but it's a great place to lose a propeller. As I bet the driver knows. I think the next point of interest is Camp Squano. There was actually the house with the little white birches in front of it. There was a gentleman from New Jersey or someplace, he came in, he bought that house, and he clear cut the waterfront.
That's what they did with the big house.
Yeah,
up
I can't
there.
even tell you the fines he had to pay.
They cut down my birch trees.
Shame on them. He had to put them back.
I'm gonna find them.
Yeah,
I
he
am.
had to put them back in addition to paying a huge fine.
They must have had a professional gardener,
Yeah.
because they just wiped everything right out and they put in whatever they wanted.
Whatever they wanted.
Whatever that would be appealing.
Yep.
I was shocked because,
Oh, this has grown up a lot.
yeah.
Yeah, so this is where camp. Platforms and some tents, and the kids came in on their bicycles from the end of the lake because you couldn't drive in at that time. And then it was the 38 hurricane that was when they rebuilt after that. That's when they put up the cabins. A lot of these cabins are still from that time period.
Really? Yeah.
You know, like this one right on the front would be from that time period. There's some newer buildings.
I
Their
remember them
dining
being
lodges.
dark green.
Yep, I remember them being dark green, and then I remember them being brown.
Oh, really? Yeah. I'm not sure about the brown, but I
Yep.
remember the green. Everything was green.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the big dock that came out, and like you said,
Yes.
the big canoes that they had,
They did.
and they had a lot of them.
They did. They had a lot, and they would sing and chant, and
Yep.
and I was, you know, young. I was sitting on my rock, and they'd come down, and then they'd come back, and they'd go twice a day,
Yep.
morning and afternoon.
Yep.
Yep.
And they'd send the kids out in the canoes, even on the windy days. There'd be white caps out, and they'd send the kids out in the canoes. And I can remember towing more than one or two of them back.
Yeah. Yeah.
They'd just be out there in the middle of the lake, spinning in circles, trying to figure out what to do.
I had such good memories when I was down here, because this is where I learned how to swim. And my relatives would come from Silver Spring, Maryland, and come up here and stay because we had room. And also they'd come from Cleveland, Ohio, and they'd stay for a couple weeks. And it was wonderful. You know, that was the first time I ever had roasted corn, and that's the way I like it. Nice and brown. Yeah. And we had a milkman. He would come to the house, and his name was Mr. Case. And he would leave our white milk in a bottle, in a quart bottle. And then I knew that he had chocolate milk, and I thought, oh, I'd like to have some. Mom, can we get chocolate milk today? And she said, yeah, sure, we can have. So we got one chocolate and one plain. And he would come down probably twice a week, something like 2 or 3 times a week. And we would have bottles of milk, and they'd take the bottles back. You know, we didn't get any money on them.
No.
But he'd pick up the bottles and take them back, and we would that's the way we had our milk. Yeah. And he was from Keene, and I knew one of his daughters, Ruth. Yeah.
Well, back then, a lot of the families from Keene, they had little summer camps down here.
That's right,
Yep.
they did. Yeah.
This new-looking house right here with all the glass on the front,
Yeah.
that's where the Zimmerman's cottage was.
Oh, is that right?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
It was
Yep.
a little red place,
Yes.
and it sat just like that with
Yep.
the dock right on the front over the water.
Yes. Yep.
And that building is new this year.
Yes. Yep. That
And
looks
then-
really nice.
I remember when I was little, this place to the right of it, it was a little white place that sat up on top of a hill.
Really?
And
I don't remember
yeah,
that.
it sat up on top of the hill. You could look at it from the town beach, and it was this little white place sitting up on top of the hill.
Yeah.
And then when this one was built, they tore that one down and tore the hill down with it.
Really?
Yep. Which was it. So that's another thing that my friend Carl and I were talking about today. He said it was a shame to see this go, and then his wife piped in. She says, and just like the one next to it.
Yeah.
And his
Yeah.
family owns this red one right here, so it's close to there. You know, and they came up here when Carl came up here. You know, when he was a kid all the time.
Yep. About the cove a lot because it's in close proximity to Zimmerman's,
Right.
property.
And then the Gamarlo's place was where the rock with the diving board is.
Yes.
That was Gamarlo's, and next door was Stories.
Yes. Yep. Yep. And Jackie, you know Jackie? Jackie Gamallo.
Yes.
She's up in the Perkins Cove,
Oh, no kidding.
and she has a restaurant, and it's called Jackie's.
Perfect.
Yep.
Perfect.
And she owns half of Perkins Cove,
Wow.
and she is a very challenging person to work for because
That's
I
polite.
have a good friend that is the chef there, and he makes delicious soups. It's just fantastic. And so we've gone up, and I've asked, is Jackie here? And sometimes she will be, and sometimes not.
Yep.
And she still had probably a 1950 Cadillac.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and it was a convertible, and long, and I mean people shouldn't have long cars up in Ogunquit,
Right.
Because their parking lot is full. She has 3 parking places, and her place is full a lot of the time because it's right on the rocks where the ocean is. There's nothing in between. There's no building at all, just rocks. And
That
and
makes it very
that's-
busy.
It is, yes, very busy.
The Gamarlos sold it to the Johns, and then the Johns bought a place on Spofford Lake, I think, and they sold it to the Daffeldeckers, who have owned it since I was a teenager. Their son actually bought and built a place down further on the lake.
And it was always yellow.
Yep, it's
When-
always been yellow.
Yep. And I saw it from across the lake.
I
I
painted
said,
it
I know
once.
that's Gamallo's.
Yep. I painted it once. I've done many flips off that diving board, but every time I jumped on it, I was like, how come this thing hasn't broken yet? Because as far as I know, it's been there forever. I don't know that it's ever been replaced. That's where we're going next, to George Hanna's place.
Oh, George Hanna. Yes. Yep.
George and his brother Weed.
Yes.
Weed, I think, owns that one maybe?
He was one of my dad's friends, Weed Hanna. They used to come over to our place. Yes.
That's when I was just cleaning out my parents' house. I found a couple of Christmas cards from a long time ago from Weed Hanna.
Yeah. Yep.
So let's see. No, it's that one with the poor wraparound porch. So this one was probably Weed's.
Oh, okay.
This one was Weed Hanna, and then the
Yeah.
other one was George Hanna.
Yep. George was the lawyer.
And George, this house was actually an inn at one point, or some people say it was a brothel, but it's 6 bedrooms, and every single one of these bedrooms has a number on the door. And my friend Bill Larson owns it now. He actually restored it. He did an amazing job restoring it. And literally pulled up all the old flooring so he could replace the floor joist, and then paid to put the flooring back. It was amazing.
Yeah.
But there was a guest register that I heard about, and then he told me he had heard about it too. And I ran into Tom Hanna and I asked him if he remembered the guest register. He said, "Remember it?" He says, "I have it."
Really?
Yeah.
I know Tom.
Yep. Tom
He
has
married
it.
a good friend of mine,
Yep.
Barbara.
He took it. He says, "I wasn't going to let it go with the place."
Yeah.
And then when my friend Bill bought it, he found a sign on the porch that says Ranville Christ. I got nothing. Been trying to figure out why it would have been called that, but it is definitely another one of Denman's buildings.
Now,
Go
stone
inside, the
cottage
architecture is the
coming
same.
up. Where is the marker been for the big rock?
Oh, it's up there further.
Up further?
The black one is right there.
Yes. This red one here with the cross on the dock, I'm pretty sure that's Hager's, and has been for a long time. One of the few that's owned by a local family. And still used as a keep.
I'm pretty sure that's the dock he used to fish off.
Yeah, Stones is up there, right behind that rock, that
Yeah.
marker.
That's where I used to come down here with Grandpa and fish.
And I talked with the
Yeah.
daughter
Yep.
of us. She was a stone, and they're the cottage is in a trust.
Yep.
And her sister wants to buy them out. And so we talked for a short while, and I asked how much this house was, and he thought $2 million. That was the last he heard.
Last
But
I
now
heard, the asking price was 2.1.
And then they put it down, they said, to $1 million. Yeah.
What's with the dilapidated house halfway out to the channel? How come that's been like that
The
forever?
little yellow place?
Yeah,
Because it belongs to the guy with the $1 million place.
Okay. Okay, that would be why. Everyone always asks me about it when I bring them out here. And I'm like, I don't know, it's been like that since I can remember.
We rented a little green cottage when my children were young, just beyond our property, maybe 4 or 5 cottages down, and it was it was nearer the road than the water. But it's still there.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of them are still here.
Yes.
It's amazing.
They are. Yep.
I love the one with the little garage.
The little boathouse?
Yep. You can go drive your boat right in there. You'd have to have an awful small boat.
You know whose house that was? The little boy that told me not to drive the boat because his dad didn't want me to. So we went down the other end. I drove the boat and he got into trouble. That's the place right there.
Yeah.
Yep, I remember it. And they had squirrels. You know the little candies that are thin? And they had squirrels. I thought I died and gone to heaven because they gave me some squirrels.
Yeah. Yeah. The Stones was the blue one.
Yes. Yep, that's right. That's the stone. Yep. And there's the big rock. Yep.
Yeah, that hasn't changed much over the years.
Nope. Nope, that looks just the same.
Yep.
I don't
Seems
remember
to me
who
there
that
was a maroon one right beside it that's almost identical to it. Looks like it's green now.
I don't know who that was, but the red house was Earl Quimby's. Yep.
Now somewhere down here,
But it looks different now.
I actually
It's not the same.
believe it's this dock with the whatever that is built on the end of it and a paddle boat tied to it. That's a dock that is used by all the property owners in the Swanzey Lake Heights development, because every lot had right of way down to the water,
Oh, is that right?
and that's where the right of way was.
And where is that? Which place?
This dock right here with the chairs on it and a paddle boat.
The little crane thing.
Oh,
thing
yes.
on top.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, a little weather vane on top of it.
Yep.
So it's
Yep.
a right of way down in between those two buildings from the road.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
you would look at it and think that it goes with the tan cottage, but the tan cottage dock is actually over here.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Or vice versa. This one's the right of way and that one goes with the tan cottage. One or the other of them.
Yep. One day I drove down here and I thought, I hope a bell and a whistle doesn't blow coming into their driveway. I didn't want the police after me. I was
Yep.
just gonna, because you can't see it from the road. And I thought, well, what is built there now? Because it was a split level the last time, and
Yep.
they tore it down. And then they tore down the other two houses down on the property. But that was my rock right there. Yep. Looks like a tree growing out of it.
Yep.
And we had a driveway that came down, came in front of our cottage, and went back up.
Yep. I remember that driveway.
Yep.
I remember that driveway.
Streeter was the first one.
the one that's
Yep.
the one that's not there anymore.
Yep. And then there was Semino. They were the people who managed the Carpenter home. Mrs.
Yep.
Semino.
Yep.
Yep. Yep. And our grandfather lived in the home along with the sister because he was a Lane. He was Chetty Lane.
Okay.
You know the Lane family?
I know the Lane family. Yeah.
Yep, and Chetty lived in the original house where he grew up. Yep. And he had it for
Nice.
sale for $12,000, but it needed so much work. And we had two little children,
Yep.
and I said their dad wasn't, the handy one, and I thought it never could probably get fixed up the way it should with with a new water system and electricity and the upkeep and so forth. The fireplace needed to be redone and so forth.
Hey, the yellow one's not yellow anymore. Over here, and this, like I said on the way in, I remember that being Davis's place, but their driveway, we used to call it Suicide Hill, because we'd go sliding down their driveway in the wintertime. And I had a friend who had a camp, his parents had a camp here, and they would come up for school vacations in the wintertime, so naturally we'd be out sledding and whatever. And we'd always send him down first.
What are we doing, guys?
Good, you?
Yeah.
And he actually broke his collarbone on that driveway.
This used to be a sandbar. You could walk right down this area, and you couldn't, and the boats couldn't come in, but we could use a little flat bottom boat and go to each side.
Yep.
But it was a sand bar. That's what we called it. Yes. And there used to be a lot of frogs there.
Yep.
So we caught them, and we had frog legs for supper.
Yuck.
Tastes just like chicken.
I'm going with yuck on that one, thanks.
My dad was a hunter, and we would eat what he killed. I don't care what it was. Raccoon. We went raccoon hunting late at night. My mom wasn't too excited about that one, but we'd go to Walpole, and they had tree coons, and they had hound dogs.
Yeah.
Coon dogs.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty happy to say that my parents hunted at the grocery store.
Is that right? It's a fantastic memory of good memories of my childhood that I hope that I will always remember. That this is where I felt so content as a youngster. You know, I was all right by all myself on my rock with 4 double peanut butter crackers, and then I'd eat those, and I'd run back in the house and get 4 more.
Yep, I like my rock too.
And
And every time I look around, every time I look around I remember something else. I can remember this was Mr. and Mrs. Lewis were here, and they were snowbirds, so they'd be here and they'd come up early in the spring and stay. And they had it all chain link fenced, and they had the little yap dogs, and you'd get off the bus down here at the bottom of the hill and go to walk home, and those dogs would just run up and down that fence, yapping at you the whole time. And it's funny, I forgot about it until just now.
That's funny.
Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love you.
Love you too. You're even lighter than I thought you were going to be.
106.
So ready, go.
Well, we were just standing here talking about how much nicer this looks down here than it used to. This area was never kept up like this, so there's a big change.
There is, yes, because I've noticed that too. I noticed that somebody is taking care of it, and so that it's a little more appealing.
Yep, take care of it. People are enjoying it, so yeah.
Because the first year we were here would have been 1948, and then my dad kept it for 8 years, and he sold it in 1953.
Yep.
And he bought a business on West Street, photography business, and so that's what he used the money for.
Yeah, my parents moved down here in 1955
Mm-hmm.
and raised all the kids here,
Yeah.
and spent the rest of their life here. And I grew up down here, and I think I have a different perspective than a lot of people, because I was here year round.
Yes.
I was here when the lake was nice and warm and great to go swimming in. And I can remember plenty of winters when we didn't have snow and it was cold and the entire lake was nothing but a sheet of ice, and you could
Yes.
skate absolutely anywhere you wanted.
Sure. Yes. Well, this has been great, and I know that you have a lot of more history because you've looked into it. So I'm glad to hear about that.
Yep.
That's really nice. But
But we both have a lot of good memories.
and we do have memories. That's right. And I hope that my little brain will be able to remember it, for the next 20 years.
I
But
think
it's
it
been
will.
fun. Yeah.
It's a place where you don't mind being by yourself,
That's right.
but it's not as easy to be here and be by yourself as it used to be.
Yeah. No, it's all great, the whole thing, and I'm just elated, and I'll never forget this time.